Good morning. Please turn with me to Psalm 127. I didn't wait this morning. I'm sorry. Good morning. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you especially. And I'm knocking the mic down. Does that matter? Am I on this one? Doesn't matter. Good, good. All right, Psalm 127. As we look at the title or the subject this morning, Unless the Lord Build, which is the beginning of a famous passage that goes, Unless the Lord build the house. Those who build labor in vain. And why does that connect to what we asked Josh to read this morning? Well, he talked about learning to calm and quiet our souls. Or at least that's what David was talking about. And that touched me this week because he said sometimes these psalms are like water. You don't want to overtalk them because the relief is obvious. And as I get older, there are times in my life when I read something like that and I appreciate the value in simply asking God to calm and quiet my soul. Understanding that we talked a few weeks back about the whole concept of ambition and how having God woven into our ambitions helps keep us from a lot of potential long-range misery in ministry or other things, from walking a path we never should have walked in the first place. Oh, but Psalm 127 adds to that wisdom by saying there's another level of mistakes I can make if I don't calm and quiet my soul. And it's building the wrong way on the right path. And that to me is the context for Psalm 127. One not necessarily penned by David, but begins in verse 1. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil. For he gives to his beloved sleep. Verse 3. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. And it led me to think of a number of things, but most, or maybe more than anything, it's that whole concept of, since we're talking about David, indulge me a little bit more as we go hopefully a little bit further into the life of David and potentially his wisdom. As we heard a few weeks back, and you've heard probably throughout your life, that as he pursued Saul, one of the things he didn't do as Saul was delivered into his hands at least twice, is he did not strike out against Saul, citing at least 2 times, touch not God's anointed. And sometimes that's used as protection, as you never talk bad about the preacher. And the cool thing was when I went through the short lessons on this one, there were all these preachers who were like, that's not what that means. No. What it actually means is in a time of vulnerability. It's basically a passage that was used to talk about the way that Abraham was protected when he was just a man wandering into a strange territory, into kingdoms that could have ended that whole prophecy that God made about his life with a quickness, as we say. But that whole concept of touch not God's anointed talked about the way in which God protected him in times when he was vulnerable from pressures and challenges to his own life that he didn't even necessarily know were there. And so that's the context for that phrase. And that's the same thing that David quoted when he finds Saul, no matter how much wrong Saul had done to him, in a vulnerable position in the cave. And he basically had the option. He was clearly headed in the right direction. He was going to be king. It was anointed. Even God's own prophet didn't necessarily recognize it as being David, but once it became clear, he knew the kingdom's mine anyway. So, but he realized that if he built on a group of habits or a set of habits that allowed him to touch God's anointed, then he was going to be setting a pattern that he would have to live under during his reign. Who wants to go to work wherever you go? I talk about work a long time. Always having to look over your shoulder. That's the wisdom that we have in that principle, touch not God's anointed. He's allowing God to build his house because we know the promise. David, all you got to do is do right. I'm going to establish your throne forever. Key word being, I am going to establish your throne forever. But there are some times when he will let you get close enough to just take it. It's not wrong. It's definitely no more wrong than what Saul was doing. It's just what he was doing to me. But it is not so much remembering the simple command or promise that God made. I will build your house. Understanding that there are so many variables that would go into me having to, okay, now if I touch Saul, now I got to do this, now I got to do that, because he's talking about building. Unless the Lord build the house, that's one thing you got to worry about. But who's going to watch it? I was watching a movie just this weekend about this major crash they had. What was it, with Netflix a while back? All these servers were going down. And they were like, well, what's going on? How are all these super secure companies not able to watch their own cybersecurity? And they were. But there was this guy sitting in a bunker in a small town in Germany who they ticked off. And as much as they pay for cybersecurity for all those companies, that one guy sitting in a bunker in a small town in Germany helped to prove why, unless the Lord watches the house, David, it doesn't matter what you do to get it. Is that really the way you want to have to live your life? Always looking over your shoulder to make sure that you can sleep in peace. Why does that matter? Well, because he's going to go on to say, it is vain in verse 2 that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives his beloved sleep. We've talked about that before. It's a blessing when we can walk in a way where we just wait long enough for God not only to build it for us, but to watch it in a way that we just fall out, head on the pillow. And see, I can't necessarily do that if I'm setting out in a way that says, okay, I'm going to build and I'm going to try to watch. And we got a product out there for all that, right? Number of people selling you builder services. Number of people selling you security for more than just your computer and your servers. The number of people selling us aids for sleep, right? All those things we struggle with. He's saying, yeah, it seems really silly to serve God on one hand until you start realizing all the things you have to do to try to produce your own happiness. And then God stops seeming quite so superstitious. And you just start hoping. Is there really one place I can go to get all that? Well, I just try to work. So, amen. Because it's hard enough for me to just get done the things that he has set out for me to do without me having to sit up and try to worry about. But he's saying, if that's the path you start on, that's the path I'm going to let you walk. How do you know? Go back to the time of the kings to see it's not just David trying to be a super Christian. Use that in class. Of course he wasn't a Christian. No Christians, Dan, right? But trying to be a super servant of God. Please go back to me and think about some kings who tried to go a different route and tried to take it. We don't have to go very far. You remember a young man by the name of Absalom? Yeah. How'd that work out for him? When he decided, wait a minute, I can do this whole judging thing better than Dad can. How'd that work out for him? He got a seat on the throne for a while. Oh, but let's not throw stones at Absalom. David had more than one kid. Solomon, wisest king in the history of Israel, as far as we know. Well, how'd things work out for Solomon? Please go back with me to 1 Kings, the 11th chapter. They went really well for a while. Really well for a while, until the famous 11th chapter. Preacher hack. If you want to know the fall of David and Solomon, find the 11th chapters in their lives. 11th chapter of, I think it's 2 Samuel, talks about David and Bathsheba. It's when the trend started downward for David. 11th chapter of 1 Kings, it's when things started to trend downward for Solomon. I think I said that one before. But understand there's a unique thing that I often forget about Solomon's decline, and that is as God had promised, the kingdom was going to be divided into the northern 10 tribes and the southern 2. God knew who he was going to pick before Solomon knew, even in all his wisdom. So in verse 26 of chapter 11 of 1 Kings, it says, Jeroboam the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zeredah, a servant of Solomon, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow, also lifted up his hand against the king. And this was the reason why he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built up the Millo and closed the breach of the city of David, his father. The man Jeroboam was very able, and when Solomon saw that the young man was industrious, he gave him charge over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. And at that time, when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him on the road. Now Ahijah had dressed himself in a new garment, and the two of them were alone in the open country. And Ahijah laid a hold of the new garment that was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I'm about to tear the kingdom from the hand of Solomon, and I will give you 10 tribes. It's going to go on. You know how it works out. 10 tribes go north, 2 stay in the hand of the tribe of Judah. Because why? Because God is going to make a promise to David that he will always have someone to sit on the throne. But we talked about it before. God might make a promise to me, but I don't always know how that's going to look. So I don't want to take for granted just because he's given me a promise of even eternal security, that I understand that that's going to look the same way no matter what I do. See, I would prefer a 12-tribe security as opposed to a 2-tribe security. And I think we all would do well to prefer a 12-tribe salvation to a 2-tribe salvation. But the choice is ours. And we all get to pick what salvation is going to look like. Right? Or whether we get to keep it at all. Completely different discussion. But understand, the one thing that the Bible makes no mistakes about is God ain't going to guarantee you what the building looks like, even if he's guaranteed you a direction. So once you've got your ambitions healthy, once again, Psalm 127, unless the Lord builds the house, you are lucky if you still got 2 tribes left, depending upon the choices that we make. Understand, I'm at my best when I am begging God for a 12-tribe path or pattern of building. Please build it for me, God, because I want all 12 if I can. I want all 12. Why? Because Solomon, even the wisest king, as he starts to see what's going on, toward the end of the prophecy for Jeroboam, verse 38, he is going to give Jeroboam essentially the same warning he gave Solomon before God decided he was going to tear 10 tribes away from his son. This is him talking to Jeroboam, not Solomon, even though it sounds like the same thing. Verse 38, and if you will listen to all that I command you and walk in my ways and do what is right in my eyes by keeping my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, I will be with you and I will build you a sure house as I built for David. And I will give Israel to you, and I will afflict the offspring of David because of this, but not forever. Verse 40. Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam. But Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt to Shishak, the king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. The wisdom doesn't matter. It's one of the reasons why I try to manage expectations. I like to try to sound smart. It doesn't matter. Why? We got a pattern of smart guys who ended up in real bad situations. Because you can't kill your way out of a problem that can only be fixed by repentance. And so once I start seeing the 2-tribe reality of my existence, you don't think I can get just as tempted as Solomon to try to fix my problems by... God forbid that I get to a place where I say it can't be me. This is the wisest guy to ever lead this nation. You think it can't happen to us? Once you realize what salvation looks like after you've lost all those opportunities, tribes, chances that you really could have had, it'll drive you to a place to do some things that could really make you worse, right? And so ultimately, he's saying when David has the wisdom to say, God, please help me to quiet my spirit. Please get me past the point where all I want is the right path, and I realize there are so many things left to build that I can mess up to make this end a misery. When it could be so much better if I can just learn to have you quiet my ambitions and the approach to me getting what I want. Please move forward with me, though, because Solomon wasn't the worst one. Solomon ended up pretty well because he ended up ushering in a period of time where the northern 10 tribes, I'll give you 3 guesses as to whether or not that Jeroboam guy listened to God. Yeah, no, he didn't. And so it led to a period of time where everybody was like, well, the kingdom's up for grabs. I think I could rule just as good as that guy. And so let me see what I can do in chapter 15. Jeroboam's going to get to end up not great, but relatively well, because he did a good thing for the most part. But as things go on in chapter 25 of chapter 15, verse 25 of chapter 15, We're going to see some new characters introduced into his line, the line of the kings of Israel. Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the ways of his father and in the sin which he made Israel to sin. Baasha, the son of Ahijah of the house of Issachar, conspired against him. And Baasha struck him down at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines. For Nadab and all Israel were laying siege to Gibbethon. So Baasha killed him in the 3rd year of Asa, the king of Judah, and reigned in his place. How do you think that's going to work out for, what's his name, Baasha? Well, maybe not too bad. But just because God allows us to prolong the amount of years that we can live after having done some things that might have been a little bit underhanded does not mean it's always going to once again end 12 tribes well. Why? How do you know? Because down in verse 7, as it describes the end of Baasha's reign, moreover, the word of the Lord came by a prophet to Jehu, the son of Hanani, against Baasha and his house, both because of all the evil that he did in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger with the work of his hands and being like the house of Jeroboam, and also because he destroyed it. Understand, this is a man who is making a very different decision from what David made. 2 men are watching wicked kings at work. David's like, yeah, he's there, but that just doesn't, something about that just feels wrong. And he abstains from doing what everybody, a lot of folks at least, thought probably should have been done. Baasha goes a different route. And at the end of his life, he finds God literally prophesying against him for the way in which he killed the house of, or at least he killed Baasha. But not only that, even though God said it's going to happen anyway, he had prophesied. This guy's coming to an end. Maybe, just maybe, if Baasha had waited and withheld judgment, he wouldn't have ended up with the consequences that he drew just for himself, because it seemed like he did okay. But what does that mean when he says, because he destroyed it, being like Jeroboam, God is prophesying? Well, what does that prophecy look like? Okay, well, let's keep reading. Verse 8. In the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Elah, the son of Baasha, began to reign over Israel at Tirzah. He reigned 2 years, but his servant Zimri, commander of half his chariots, conspired against him when he was at Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Arza, who was over the house of Tirzah, the household in Tirzah. Zimri came in and struck him down and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned in his place. How do you think it turned out for Zimri? You're right, I don't have to. Let's just keep reading. Because when you get down to verse 15 of that same chapter, in the 27th year of King Asa of Judah, Zimri reigned 7 days. Don't get your hopes up. It's not going to go too much longer than 7 days. In Tirzah, now the troops were encamped against Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines. And the troops who were encamped heard it, said, Zimri has conspired and he has killed the king. Therefore all Israel made Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel that day in the camp. So Omri went up from from Gibbethon, and all Israel with him, and they besieged Tirzah. And when Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went into the citadel of the king's house and burned the king's house over him with fire and died because of his sins that he committed, doing evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the ways of Jeroboam, and for his sin which he committed in making Israel to sin. What could he have done in 7 days, we asked in class? What are you doing a week? It's a week! A lot of you may go back to that conspiracy, though. How do you know? Keep reading, verse 20. Now, the rest of the acts of Zimri and the conspiracy that he made, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? It keeps going on like that. Okay, let's read one more, because there are plenty more. Let's read one more, though. Verse 21. Then the people of Israel were divided into 2 parts. Half of the people followed Tibni, the son of Ginath, to make him king, and half followed Omri. But the people who followed Omri overcame the people who followed Tibni, the son of Ginath. So Tibni died, and Omri, okay, is it tiring yet? Does it get old? Because that's the cycle that Israel's caught in. And understand, it's just Israel, right? We talked about it in the young adults class. It was catchy. Because then Judah started to intermarry with Israel. Why? Just to get peace. Because they started fighting. Of course, the bottom two tribes in the northern 10 tribes. And in order to try to have peace, let's just okay, we'll just do what you want, and I'll follow you to war, Ahab. And so it spread into Israel's leadership. How do you know? Let's go to 2 Chronicles. Let's go to 2 Chronicles. We'll get to see 4 more kings. 4 more kings. Beginning around verse 21 of 2 Chronicles. So Jehoshaphat has entered into what seems to be a marriage covenant. Some translations may literally call it a marriage covenant with the house of Ahab because he's sick of fighting. So he's like, okay, let's go fight other people. Just stop bothering me. But it doesn't work out so good because Ahab still has some habits that he just needs to drop. And so Jehoshaphat sees a relatively, once again, peaceful end to his kingdom. But however, the union between his household and Ahab's household is going to have bad consequences for his coming generations. Verse 1 of chapter 21. Jehoshaphat slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And Jehoram, his son, reigned in his place. He had brothers, the sons of Jehoshaphat, Azariah, Jehiel, Zechariah, Azariah, Michael, and Shephatiah. All these were the sons of Jehoshaphat, king of Israel. Their father gave them great gifts of silver and gold and valuable possessions, together with fortified cities in Judah. But he gave the kingdom to Jehoram because he was the firstborn. When Jehoram had ascended to the throne of his father and he was established, he killed all his brothers with the sword. What more do you need, bud? He literally gives you the kingdom, and we've talked about it before. There is nothing you can give me when I am at my worst that will calm and quiet my soul. Once again, it's the wisdom of David. If you can, God willing, calm and quiet my soul, all you got to give me is a hello to give me peace of mind. I don't even need that. Because God teaches you how to get through moments in life when you have nobody at all. Oh, but you can give me the kingdom and it's still not going to be enough. If God hasn't helped me get to a place where I have peace of mind and peace of spirit, I'm still going to be looking over my shoulder for enemies that ain't there. Creating an enemy in the Almighty in the way that I lash out against brother and sister from the depths of my own, we've said it before in previous weeks, personal insecurities. So that's why when David realizes, God, help me calm and quiet my soul. Is he coming from the perspective of some super Christian? I got this, God. I'm content. No! It's a process. And sometimes it's one that's helped by the school of hard knocks. And so I don't know when David wrote this psalm, but I do know that it means a whole lot more to me the older that I get. Because I realize what it's like to try to fix it myself. And like we say, all the messes that I can make trying to put it back together again. Because I don't want to admit that I might have messed it up, right? But there are times when I need to just step back and admit, God, yes, I did, yeah. And if you can, like the brothers have talked about mercy this morning, sometimes the mercy isn't just forgiveness. The mercy is the concept that I need to acknowledge that I need God to help fix the stuff that I'm trying to put back together. And so that's part of the humility that comes with confession. It sounds simple, like we say, every day, first day of the week, we come together to break bread. It's a personal time of self-evaluation. But it's not just to figure out whether or not I've done stuff wrong. Yeah, let me break the news to you. Yeah, I did stuff wrong this week, right? Part of the value in self-examination is realizing I need God to help fix it. Unless the Lord build a house, those who build it labor in vain. And that's part of the wisdom that you'll start to see after, God willing, after this period of Israel's kings. Going back to 2 Chronicles. And so now Jeroboam has made a huge mess of a non-problem. He's going to go further than that. After he killed all his brothers in verse 4 with the sword, and also some of the princes of Israel. Verse 5, Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done. For the daughter of Ahab was his wife. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. How does it end up for Jehoram? Yeah, exactly. I don't have to tell you, it's probably not good. Because if you skip down in that very same chapter, chapter 21 to verse 14, really starts a little bit before that. This time a prophet's going to send a letter to him, and let's just, hopefully a little bit of time. Let's start in verse 12. And a letter came to him from Elijah the prophet, saying, Thus says the Lord, the God of heaven. Thus says the Lord, the God of David your father, because you have not walked in the ways of Jehoshaphat your father, or in the ways of Asa king of Judah, but have walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, and have enticed Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem into that word, as the house of Ahab led Israel into that word. And also you have killed your brothers of your father's house, who were better than yourself. Behold, the Lord will bring a great plague on your people and your children and your wives and all your possessions. And you yourself will have a severe sickness with the disease of your bowels until your bowels, the rest of what he says. Verse 16, and the Lord stirred up against Jehoram the anger of the Philistines and the Arabians who are near the Ethiopians. And they came up against Judah and invaded it and carried away all the possessions they found that belonged to the king's house. And also his sons and his wives, so that no son was left to him except Jehoahaz, his youngest son. And after this, the Lord struck him in his bowels with an incurable disease. You can read the rest. That a scare tactic? Yes, that's a passage that preachers can use to try to scare folks. But it doesn't mean anything if I read it and you're scared and then you don't have any of that happen to you. But God has a specific thing planned for each of us. And it's called me living beneath my potential. And so here's the thing. I don't know what God has planned for the mistakes that I make in trying to build it myself. But I know he's got something if that's the path that I choose. And I know that he's given me the warnings of all of these kings, some who chose not to pick up the knife and building their own household, and some who chose to help us understand that none of these men were perfect. David never killed anyone. David never killed anyone in error. He killed Uriah in wicked sin. But like we said before, it's the relationship that matters. I heard an older, wiser preacher preach one time about that whole concept of forgiveness, which is what some of our brothers have mentioned this morning. Some of that forgiveness is based in the nature of the relationship that I have. It's going to be a whole lot easier for me to forgive a brother with whom I've established trust than it is to forgive one who is constantly in the pattern of the kings of Israel. We looked at it in class this morning. Term you'll see in your study guide. Maybe you pull out your phone during small group and look up, what is Machiavellianism? What is Machiavellianism? It's a big, complex word, sometimes attached to psychological counseling for that time when I'm getting in my feelings and my bag. We talk about it, and young folks talk about a bag. When you're playing ball, it's how many moves do you have that can break down your defender and take his ankles? In life, your bag is, what's my bag of tricks for getting my way in life? And because we live in the world of, turn on your TV. How many seasons are they on now in Survivor? Who knows? Exactly right? How long have we been fed Survivor? To the point where it's just one option for cutthroat television that shows you how to go into your bag and win millions by learning how to cut throats and stab backs to get what you need. The problem is we go from the assembly into a world that tells us this is completely normal. It's fun. It's not fun. Why are you watching it? And if you're not watching it, there are millions of other people who are. And you got to go to work with them. If you think that just stays at home and the TV, good luck with that. And so understand how in life when we go into environments where we have been conditioned by Survivor and Big Brother and fill in the blank and this island and that island and I'm afraid and this and that. It's you got any kind of option and if you get bored of the ones we got here, just go dial up some of the UK TV. Mom likes BritBox, so not those, Mom. Not just BritBox, South Africa. I lived over there. They love those shows. They have almost one for every one we've got. None of our actors, same scripts. It's global. Backstabbing's the new sport. But God is helping us to understand, once again, you can build your house that way, but that house is on the clock. And the piece there is the piece that you can the piece that you can manufacture by backstabbing and cutting throats. And if you don't have enough to do at work, to where you got enough energy left to try to create the kind of peace that God can simply give you by simply resting and waiting in the things that he's promised, then I'm happy for you because you got more time than I got. I'm exhausted enough. Just being a preacher. We accuse being like we are in a profession. You can be lazy as a preacher if you want to. I might as well just confess. It's easy to do, but like the rest of life, it comes with consequences, right? And so with that, to the degree that you have plenty of freedom, that's a blessing because somebody's saying they trust you to do your job without micromanaging you. But at the same time, that kind of unsupervised use of your time comes with consequences. And that's what we're seeing in the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah and the wisdom of David. Lord, teach me to quiet my spirit so that as I go out into a world, David didn't have a survivor. David didn't necessarily have this island and that island. But do you think that all of the sins of Israel during the period of the judges just kind of went away because we got a king now? No. He was going out into a culture where they had a little bit of backstabbing and throat cutting to get what they wanted too. And so as a king, God used him to turn that around to begin with the people who wanted a better version of peace than the one they could manufacture with their own hammer and their own nails. But going on, at some point we probably should conclude. Please go through the kings of Judah as well in your own time. We have some verses in the small group study guide that might be good to look at. But just to focus on a little bit of that period of Israel's history. Didn't go so well for Jehoram. His son Ahaziah gets too close to the kings of Israel, and so he is swept up in the judgment that God brings through a man by the name of Jehu. However, once Athaliah, the queen mother, decides or sees a void in the kingdom of Judah, she's like, well, God never said we couldn't have a queen. So in verse 10, now when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal family of the house of Judah. But Jehoshabeth, we'll call her, the daughter of the king, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were about to be put to death. Skip to the end or toward the end of chapter or the middle of chapter 23 for me to see what happens with that young man. Verse 11 of chapter 23. Then they brought out the king's son and put the crown on him and gave him the testimony. And they proclaimed him king. And Jehoiada and his sons anointed him. And they said, long live the king. When Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and praising the king, she went into the house of the Lord to the people. And when she looked, there was the king standing by the pillar at the entrance, and the captains and the trumpeters beside the king, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpets, and the singers with their musical instruments leading in the celebration. And Athaliah tore her clothes and cried, treason! Treason! Seriously? Are you kidding? Okay. But that's what it comes to. I am at my worst when I have been sinning for so long that I'm literally saying the words of my own condemnation out of my mouth as I'm pointing the finger at a person who is trying to correct my mistakes. But that is where it comes to when I get lost in building my own house, when I get lost in watching all that I've constructed, when I forget that I need the Lord to bless the relationships in that house, or it means nothing at all anyway. And so I am at my best when I try to make my mistakes just mistakes and not habits. Because Athaliah has gotten into the habit of cutting throats and stabbing backs to the point where she's lost touch with the fact that she can't condemn anyone for treason. Treason is justice in this case. And so understand it doesn't stop there. It's not picking on Athaliah. Why? Because once Joash gets established, he's going to do some strange things too. This is the last one we'll read from, I promise. Okay, maybe I'm lying, but it's the last one we'll read from before we finish up. In chapter 24, we'll see once Joash grows up under the tutelage of Jehoiada, he's going to have a very interesting way of repaying Jehoiada. Verse 15 of chapter 24, but Jehoiada grew old and full of days, and he died. And when he was 130 years old, he was 130 years old at his death. And they buried him in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good in Israel and toward God and his house. Now after the death of Jehoiada, the princes of Judah came and paid homage to the king. Then the king listened to them, and they abandoned the house of the Lord, the God of their fathers, and served the Asherim and the idols. And wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for this guilt of theirs. Yet he sent prophets among them to bring them back to the Lord. These testified against them, but they would not pay attention. Verse 20. Then the Spirit of God clothed Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada. Pause. That's the kingmaker. That's the one who made Joash the king, who saved his life. His wife's the one who saved the kid's life. Then the Spirit of God, check me on that one. I'm pretty sure it was his wife who saved the kid's life. Verse 20. Then the Spirit of God clothed Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, the priest, and he stood above the people and said to them, Thus says God, why do you break the commandments of the Lord so that you cannot prosper? I don't want to keep pausing, but understand, the purpose statements are the life. I start to look at God's commandments as burdensome and annoying and getting in the way of my ambitions till I realize, wait a minute. He's telling me these things as counsel. Like we said it before, I've said it in past weeks. We pay buku dollars for good counseling if we can't click around and find it online. And so understand that just as that counsel, you got to pay them to try to look out for you and give the advice that can actually help you put your life back together or put it on the right track. God's offering it for free. But we consider it silly because sometimes the world considers it silly. And I want to fit in just like you. But understand, he's saying that the purpose of the things that God is commanding, that word that I hate to hear, is so that we can prosper. And that's the basis by which he tries to speak and appeal to Israel at this time. End of verse 20. Because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you. But they conspired against him. And by command of the king, they stoned him with stones in the court of the house of the Lord. Thus Joash the king did not remember the kindness that Jehoiada, Zechariah's father, had shown to him, but killed his son. And when he was dying, he said, May the Lord avenge. How do you think that's going to work out? Just read to the end of the chapter. I did promise I'd stop reading. So go ahead, read that on your own time. Because Joash, sometimes older, wiser person once told me, the way you get it is the way you lose it. And there are times in life where that might not be 100% gospel truth, but the Bible bears that out. And it's no coincidence that the punishment that Joash gets isn't the punishment that Jehoram got, which isn't the punishment that Ahab got. Jesus says it in simple terms and we overlook it. With the measure we use, it will be measured back to us. These punishments, these judgments, these gifts, these blessings, they're all tailor-made for what each individual chose to do as they built their own house. And so that's going to carry over back to the Psalms, please. Back to Psalm 132 where we'll end up. Psalm 132, which is a Psalm of David. Which we'll start in verse 1 and skip down to verse 11. I'm sorry, this is not a Psalm of David, it's a Psalm about David. Verse 1, remember, O Lord, in David's favor, all the hardships he endured, how he swore to the Lord and vowed to the mighty one of Jacob, I will not enter my house or get into my bed. I will not give sleep to my eyes or slumber to my eyelids until I find a place for the Lord, a dwelling place for the mighty one of Jacob. Behold, we have heard of it in Ephrathah. We found it in the fields of Jaar. Let us go to his dwelling place. Let us worship at his footstool. Arise, O Lord, and go to your resting place and the ark of your might. Let your priests be clothed with righteousness. Let your saints shout for joy for the sake of your servant David. Do not turn away the face of your anointed one. One of the things we focused on in the short lessons this week is it's one thing for me to like David a whole lot. Y'all know I talk about David a whole lot. Doesn't matter if God doesn't bless his line. If God doesn't bless his line, there is no promise of Jesus through David. He's not going to stop the coming of the Messiah, but it clearly could have happened a different way. Why? He's literally warning Jehoram that right now I'm just going to punish David's line. Right? He was never going to stamp them out. But like we said, 2 tribes ain't the same as 12. And so as we look at these folks talking about David, it seems like they held him in high esteem as well. But the one thing that I pray, sometimes I say, my prayer for me is my prayer for you, is that we embark on the kind of walk from this moment forward that encourages God. I say that all the time, and then I fill it in with a different thing. This week, may we live the kind of lives that encourage God to build us not just a house, but a house filled with the kind of stability that we will see throughout the rest of this chapter, as he's going to talk about the way in which he added his endorsement, like dropping fire out of the sky. The prophets of Baal versus the prophets of God on Mount Carmel. The prophets of Baal cut themselves, yelled all day. They were fans of Baal. What'd that matter? The fire ain't dropping, but I'm sorry. I pray for you to walk the kind of life that God drops holy fire on, not holy fire condemnation, but the holy fire that makes your life an example to people who know you, that as much as I love them, they can't do that for themselves. Because that's one of the promises that God puts on his people. He wants to bless you beyond what you can do with your own hammer and nails, if you'll let him. As it goes on to talk in verse 11, the Lord swore to David a sure oath from which he will not turn back. One of the sons of your body I will set on the throne. If your sons keep my covenant and my testimonies that I shall teach them, their sons also forever shall sit on your throne. That's an if-then statement. That's not a forever David statement. That's literally the psalmist saying part of the thing we like about David is he doesn't have a blank check to treat us any kind of way he wants. There is somebody in heaven who is holding him accountable for the times when he slips. Praise God, Uriah, right? Because it doesn't mean I'm always going to get to keep my life. But it does mean that there's some kind of standard that keeps us away from lawlessness, no matter how much I like David. Verse 13, for the Lord has chosen Zion and has desired it for his dwelling place. This is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, for I have desired it. I will abundantly bless her provisions. I will satisfy her poor with bread. Understand, going back to the days of Solomon, it's not just being nice to the poor. It's a sign of God when you are living in a time when even the poor people, folks come in from foreign countries and they're like, even the poor people, where are the poor? Do you have any? Because they all seem happy. These are the kinds of things that he is saying will follow his servant. And so we live in a society, we know this. You know the struggle. I think we all know the struggle, whether you live in Houston, where I'm from, or LA, or even Lewiston, of trying to make sure that everybody's taken care of. Why? He said you're always going to have the poor with you because it's a tough problem to fix. And once you start to see that problem go away, that is an indication that you are simply living in a place that's pleasing God. Because he hadn't made that an easy fix, right? And so beyond where you fall politically, just realize that over the course of God's history with his people, in the times when they were doing the things that he had asked them to do, he was fixing some of the most complex problems that they couldn't deal with. As we keep going on. Verse 16, her priests I will clothe with salvation. That goes back to the whole concept of accountability. What does this salvation mean? And I mentioned there's a preacher by the name of Zach Poonen to help clear it up. He's an East Indian brother who preaches. I don't agree with everything he says, but one of the things he does say is as Christians, we crave forgiveness, but we don't always crave salvation. See, what we do is we superimpose that term forgiveness on top of the term salvation. But when the Bible's talking about salvation, he's not talking about salvation from consequences. He's talking about salvation from the as much as I got them to crave forgiveness, then we would be, I'm ad-libbing, be in business is sometimes the way old folks say it, right? The way I say it isn't old folks. So I didn't be in business. Half of these problems would fix themselves. But we are overrun with an epidemic of people who want forgiveness but not transformation. And the Bible literally says, be transformed by the renewing of your minds. And so he's talking about his own priests. One of the ways you're going to know God's at work in this thing, the priests aren't just going to crave forgiveness. The priests are going to be in a position where their thank you to God is repentance. That's going to be an evidence that God is at work in that thing or in that place. Her saints will shout for joy. Once again, we've talked about that whole concept of it's one thing for me to put on that face and try to tell everybody it's going okay. How you doing? I'm good. But it's another thing for God to put it on my heart. Because the Bible says from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. God, give me a heart that doesn't have to force my mouth to say I'm happy, but just let it slip out because it's true. And I think it's fully connected to that whole concept of if he is going to create an environment where people are just slipping out, I'm happy. It connects to whether or not everybody's got enough because God is blessing it beyond what we can do, because integrity is something that matters, because now I'm not looking over my shoulder all the time. And guess what? The less I'm looking over my shoulder, the more I'm forgetting about all the things I'm unhappy about. And somebody asks me how it's going, and I'm happy. Unless the Lord build a house, we will never get there. And so ultimately, it seems that David has appreciated the ways in which these things just naturally flow when God puts them in order. But all he's saying, like I say sometimes, I just say, just take the first step. Just take the first step toward God providing this kind of environment that's beyond our building. Verse 17, there I will make a horn to sprout for David. I have prepared a lamp for my anointed. I'm going to go on a limb and say that's Jesus. And that whole concept of horn, out of all the biblical imagery, sometimes we have Jesus painted as a suffering servant. But the good thing about getting to hear the nuanced discussion of Jesus in the Revelation, as our brother is helping us go through the Revelation, is you get to see him not just as the lamb slain, but as the lion. Why? Because the man who wrote or penned what he got from Jesus, when he saw him in his heavenly form, he knew he was the favorite. He was the beloved apostle. When he saw Jesus as he really is, he was terrified. Fell on his face terrified because his buddy was now in his heavenly form, and as righteous an apostle as he might have been, he said, there's another level of holiness that I can't fake. I am just terrified of looking at him in truth as he is. And so the reality of this situation is that horn metaphor. Horn is like you see the cherubim. They have four faces: the face of a man, the face of an eagle, the face of an ox. I was trying to skip that and save it for last because that's the one with the horns. And what's it for? Okay, look it up. What's that? Lion. Thank you, brother. The face of a lion. The face of the ox represents the power because of the horn. Just like people still to this day like to watch bullfighting. Why is it so impressive when just a man, gets in a ring with a bull and a red cape? Because that's a level of power we're not built to deal with. And so when he's saying he is going to establish a horn for David, he's saying there is a level of power you do not understand that you will have if you just learn to wait and let the Lord build the house. No matter how bad I want it, no matter how right I think it might be, I guarantee you, I can't speak for you, I'm making a mess of it if I am not 200% sure that this is something that God wants me to do and that I'm doing it in the way he's called me to get it done. And so with that, understand, when David, like we said in Psalm 131, says, God, or verse 2 of Psalm 131, but I have calmed and quieted my soul. There are times in life when I can't clearly see what God would have me do until I have calmed and quieted my soul and begged him to build the house. That's all I got. In Jesus' name, amen. As we stand and sing.